What's happening, Facebook? I am going live, as you can see, for the first time. Yes, this is my first time going live too. Yeah. As you can see, introduce. What's that? Why say finish? I'm not finished.
I don't know. That's just saying.
Oh, okay.
When you finish. Oh, you got some viewers out there?
Hey. Okay, introduce yourself.
There are people whose presence feels like sunlight. People who walk into a room and everything simply becomes lighter. Jokisha Brown was one of those people. Her smile wasn't just beautiful, it was magnetic. She carried herself with a grace that came from surviving storms most people couldn't imagine. She was a model, an actress, a mother, and above all, a woman determined to build a better life, not just for herself, but for her son. But what happens when the light you carry begins to draw darkness closer? What happens when the very person you once trusted turns into the shadow you fear most? For months, Jokisha had been trying to move on, to heal, to breathe again, to rediscover the laughter that once came so easily. She had escaped a relationship that drained her spirit, one that left her always looking over her shoulder. Her friends say she was trying to start fresh, new work, new plans, a new outlook on life. She was learning to trust again, learning to hope again. July 1st, 2016, was supposed to be part of that fresh start. It was the day before her birthday. She had plans to celebrate, to smile, to make memories with the people she loved most. And so, she did something simple that evening, something ordinary. She stopped at a car wash in Atlanta, the kind of quick errand people run without thinking twice. But for Jokisha, that moment, that simple stop, would become the last chapter in her story. There were no warning sirens. No sign of what was about to unfold. In the middle of a regular evening, with city lights glowing and traffic moving like any other night, someone was waiting. The sound that broke the silence that night wasn't thunder or fireworks. It was something far colder, something final. And just like that, the laughter, the light, the plans for tomorrow were gone. News stations would soon flash her picture across screens with a headline that felt far too small for the life she lived. Woman fatally shot outside Atlanta car wash. But what they couldn't capture was who she was, the mother who loved her son fiercely, the friend who always answered late-night calls, the woman who gave her heart to people even when it had been broken before. For those who knew her, it wasn't just heartbreak, it was disbelief. Because Jokisha wasn't a stranger to danger. She had faced fear before and fought hard to protect herself. She had done what so many are too afraid to do, she had walked away. But the darkness she escaped refused to let her go. Behind the headlines, behind the investigation, lies a truth about control, obsession, and how love can turn into something unrecognizable. It's a story of strength and survival, but also of a system that couldn't save her even when the warnings were loud enough to hear. This isn't just another crime story. This is about a woman who saw the danger coming and still couldn't escape its reach. A woman whose courage was met with cruelty, whose voice still echoes long after her final words. Jokisha Brown's story is not only about what was lost, it's about what she left behind. A reminder that fear doesn't always come from strangers, and that sometimes, the people who promise to love you are the ones you need protection from. As we look deeper into the final days of Jokisha's life, we'll uncover the truth behind the fear she lived with, the warnings she gave, and the justice she deserved. Her story isn't just meant to be told, it's meant to be remembered. Because somewhere out there, another woman is standing at her own crossroads, trying to decide whether to stay silent or speak out. And if Jokisha's story can help even one person choose safety, her light will never go out. Before the headlines. Before the flashing blue lights. Before the world learned her name for the worst reason imaginable, there was simply Kisha. To those who loved her, she wasn't just Jokisha Brown, the model or the rising actress. She was the girl who could turn an ordinary afternoon into a memory, who could walk into chaos and somehow bring calm. Her laughter could fill a room, her determination could silence doubt. She wasn't born into privilege, but she carried herself like someone who understood her own worth, a woman who knew she was destined for more. From a young age, Jokisha had that spark, the kind of drive that made people stop and listen. She dreamed of building something for herself, something her son could look up to one day. She started modeling, taking small gigs, photo shoots, appearances, anything that would get her closer to her dream. Atlanta was tough, competitive, and sometimes unforgiving, but she never let that stop her. She had a gift, not just for being in front of the camera, but for connecting with people behind it. Everyone who met her remembered her warmth. Her closest friends described her as the life of any room. She was confident, radiant, but also deeply kind. She'd help friends find jobs, lend her last bit of money if someone needed it, and somehow always had time for a word of encouragement. She didn't see herself as a celebrity, just a mother trying to make something meaningful out of her talents. At home, her son was her world. She called him her reason. No matter how demanding her schedule became, she always made sure he knew he came first. The bond between them wasn't just close, it was unbreakable. Her friends say she would light up when she talked about him. Every dream she chased, every risk she took, was for him. She wanted him to see what strength looked like, what perseverance could build. But behind the bright photos and smiles, there were shadows slowly forming, shadows that most couldn't see. For a long time, Jokisha kept her struggles private. She didn't want pity. She didn't want to be seen as weak.
Working out, I'm tired as ever. Let me tell y'all something that I really hate. And ladies, I know you guys are going to be able to relate. Fellas, you're not going to really be able to relate. But don't you hate when you use like public restrooms and stuff like that? You know, we have to squat. I mean, we can't sit on the toilets and you accidentally piss on your leg. I did that so many times. It's so annoying. I just wish I could walk around with my personal toilet because I'm tired of, I just be going there being in a rush with her and I just be squatting and sitting like that, and next thing you know, I'm like, oh shit, I'm pissed on my damn leg. I get tissue and wipe it on up. Okay, I know. I should have kept it to myself. It's frustrating. Don't you wish you had your own portable toilet? No. I wouldn't want to carry a toilet with me. I take that back too. Well, I don't know. I don't know. Okay. Well. Okay. I don't think this was smart. Bye, y'all.
But those close to her began to notice the small changes. How she started looking over her shoulder a little more, how her cheerful voice would sometimes break when she thought no one was listening. There was someone in her life, a man who, at first, made her feel loved, protected, even cherished. In the beginning, it was everything she had hoped for. He made promises, painted pictures of a beautiful future, and for a while, she believed them. But over time, that love began to shift. The same hands that once held her began to control her. The same voice that once spoke softly began to shout. It wasn't all at once, it never is. It started with jealousy, then monitoring, then the feeling that her every move was being watched. He didn't like her modeling, didn't like her independence, didn't like that other people admired her. And slowly his love became possession. Jokisha tried to make it work, as so many do. She hoped it was just stress, or temporary anger. But soon, the fear became constant. She would confide in close friends about his temper, about how she couldn't seem to please him no matter what she did.
I can't believe somebody took my brother away from the family. I want to thank everybody for helping us. I just still can't believe somebody did that. Can't believe it.
There were days she'd stay quiet, trying not to set him off. Days when the silence in her home felt heavy, thick with tension. Then came the breaking point, the moment she decided enough was enough. Jokisha left him. It wasn't easy. People often underestimate how much courage it takes to walk away from someone you once loved, especially when that person refuses to let go. But she did it. She took back her power, her peace, her freedom. For a brief time, it seemed like she was finally finding herself again. She returned to work, spent more time with her son, reconnected with friends, and smiled more often.
Mystery in Atlanta that is of particular local interest. Detectives are still trying to solve the killing of a Jacksonville native shot to death in a parking lot.
This happened Friday night as 35-year-old Jokisha Brown was sitting in her car. People know her as Keisha. Police still don't know who pulled the trigger. Channel 4's Ethan Calloway spoke with a man who knew Brown personally.
It was a shock, it was sadness, and it was a hurt because I knew her personally.
Kevin Sapp says he knew Jokisha Brown from her time living in Jacksonville. He says the initial pain of finding out she was killed near her home in Atlanta was only made worse learning how she was killed.
She was beautiful inside and out. As you can see the pictures of her, how beautiful she was that way on the inside also. Just a real sweet, kind-hearted person.
Police say the 35-year-old was shot and killed as she sat in her Mercedes outside of Northeast Atlanta's strip mall Friday night. The aspiring actress and model would have celebrated her 36th birthday the very next day. Detectives are still working to find the person who shot her, along with a motive.
Don't know why, because she was not that kind of person to make enemies. So what happened to her, I don't know why. It still bothers me and it's hurting me now.
For Brown's family, the loss is all too familiar. Keisha's brother, Marlon Bryce, was killed in March during a shootout at Jacksonville's Silver Fox Gentlemen's Club. Sapp describes the legacy he says Brown leaves behind.
Someone that you will always remember, that you'll never have something bad to say about when they're gone. When that person gone, you will remember that person the rest of your life.
She even began speaking openly about her experiences, encouraging other women to protect their peace and not tolerate control disguised as love. Still, there were moments of unease, quiet moments when she'd glance behind her car mirror a bit too long or hesitate before opening her front door. Her friends noticed, but she always brushed it off. "I'm okay," she'd say. "I'm moving on." Atlanta was her home, but it also held memories she wanted to leave behind. She was planning to relocate, start over completely. She had a new project coming up, and her confidence was slowly returning. For the first time in a while, the future looked bright again. Yet, behind that glow of new beginnings, danger was watching. The man she had walked away from was not done. He called, texted, showed up, trying to convince her to return. When persuasion failed, anger replaced it. Jokisha made reports. She told friends about her fears. Some nights, she'd stay somewhere else, just to feel safe. But no matter how much distance she created, it was never enough. Still, she refused to let fear define her. She kept showing up, to shoots, to interviews, to her son's school events. She lived like a woman determined to reclaim her story. Her resilience became a quiet act of defiance. She refused to hide. She believed she had survived the worst already. Her friends remember the last week before her birthday. She was excited, making plans, laughing again, ready to celebrate another year of life. She talked about new opportunities, maybe even expanding her work and spending more time traveling. She told one friend, "I just want peace this year." It's a word that carries so much meaning in Jokisha's story. Because despite everything she faced, the heartbreak, the threats, the fear, she never lost her heart. She was still the woman who believed in love, who believed in better days, who believed that if she kept her faith strong, life would reward her courage. No one could have imagined that her final day would come on the eve of her birthday, a day meant for joy, not tragedy. And as the sun set on that July evening, Jokisha was still that same determined woman, running errands, taking care of things, maybe thinking about what dress to wear, what cake to buy, what gift her son would surprise her with. She had no way of knowing that somewhere, someone else was planning a very different kind of surprise. Because while Jokisha was preparing to celebrate life, someone else was preparing to take it away. And that's where the story shifts, from light to darkness, from laughter to silence, from hope to heartbreak. But before the tragedy, before the loss, Jokisha Brown was simply alive. Vibrant, fierce, beautiful. A mother, a dreamer, a woman who wanted nothing more than to love and be free. When news of Jokisha Brown's passing broke, the city of Atlanta fell silent. It wasn't just another tragedy in the headlines, it felt personal. To those who knew her, to those who had laughed with her, worked beside her, or even just followed her on social media, it didn't make sense. She was on the brink of a new beginning, on the eve of her birthday, a day that should have been filled with celebration. Instead, her name became a headline that spread like wildfire: model and mother fatally shot in Atlanta. At first, confusion. Then disbelief. Then, an overwhelming wave of grief that poured through every corner of her community. Friends flooded social media with tributes. smiling photos, heartfelt messages, memories of her kindness and strength. But behind those posts was an undercurrent of anger, because those closest to her knew the truth long before the world did. They knew Jokisha had been living in fear. They knew she had tried to escape someone's grip. And now, their worst fear had come true. The investigation began immediately. Detectives pieced together the timeline. A Friday evening in July. Jokisha had stopped by a beauty supply store in the middle of the city. It was a regular errand, quick, casual, harmless. She never made it home. Witnesses described the scene in chilling detail. A sudden confrontation, a flash, a loud sound that cut through the air, and then chaos. The suspect was gone before anyone could react, disappearing into the night like a shadow. When police began retracing her steps, a familiar name surfaced, her ex-partner. The same man she had tried to distance herself from, the one she had reported, the one who couldn't let go. At first, there was hesitation to say it aloud. People wanted to believe it wasn't him, that maybe there was another explanation. But deep down, everyone knew, the signs had been there. The late-night calls. The messages. The warnings Jokisha had shared. As detectives dug deeper, they found the trail she had tried so hard to document. Text messages that started with apologies and turned into threats. Voicemails that shifted from pleading to rage. Friends revealed how she'd confided in them, saying she felt she was being watched. She had changed her routines, her routes, her habits, but fear followed her like a shadow she couldn't escape. What haunted many was that Jokisha had sought help. She wasn't silent. She had spoken out about the abuse and the fear.
Ex-boyfriend labeled a person of interest in a Jacksonville woman's murder in Atlanta is in custody a year after the crime. Jokisha Brown was living in Atlanta trying to start a career as a model and an actress when police say she was murdered.
Alfredo Capote is now in custody in Louisiana, charged with the armed robbery, false imprisonment, kidnapping, and aggravated sexual battery of 35-year-old Jokisha Brown this time last year. Investigators say Capote Brown in her Atlanta home with her son present, then kidnapped her, took her to a hotel where he again. The next day, police say she was able to escape and get help from a stranger. Just 3 months later, Brown was found murdered inside her Mercedes outside a beauty salon. Capote was named a person of interest in the murder. Brown was well known in her hometown of Jacksonville, graduating from Ribault High School.
Keisha! We love you! Keisha! Oh, God!
Her friends and family gathered for a vigil just days after her death, saying she was a kind and uplifting person. Now, Capote was arrested in Shreveport, Louisiana, on charges related to a counterfeiting scheme. He remains locked up on a $600,000 bond, and at this point, it's unclear when he will be extradited back to Atlanta to face charges in the Brown case.
But like too many women, her voice hadn't been enough to stop the danger. For her family, especially her son, the reality was unbearable. He had lost not only his mother but his anchor, the person who had shielded him from the worst parts of the world. Friends described the heartbreak in his eyes, how he kept asking questions no one could answer. And for those closest to her, grief quickly turned into a mission. They began to speak louder, demanding justice, demanding awareness, demanding that Jokisha's story not fade into the endless noise of forgotten tragedies. But while the community rallied, the investigation revealed something darker. A pattern of obsession and control that stretched back years. The man she once loved had become consumed by a need to dominate her, to possess her, to ensure that if he couldn't have her, no one else would. Detectives followed leads across state lines, tracking sightings, phone records, and connections that painted a haunting picture. This wasn't a random act. It was calculated, deliberate, and planned. Meanwhile, the emotional toll on those left behind was profound. Her mother struggled to speak in interviews, her voice trembling as she described her daughter's final days. Her friends organized vigils, holding candles in the same city where she had once lit up every room. The air was thick with sorrow, but also with determination to turn pain into purpose. In the days following her passing, more women began coming forward, women who recognized their own stories in Jokisha's. They shared messages of survival, fear, and hope. Her name became a symbol, her story a rallying cry for those still trapped in silence. But the investigation's twists didn't end there. As detectives pieced everything together, they found evidence that suggested the suspect had been following her movements, monitoring her social media, and planning the moment for weeks. Every detail was orchestrated to ensure he'd find her alone. This revelation shattered those who loved her. To know that someone could spend so much time plotting to end a light like hers, it was almost too much to bear. But it also reignited a fire for justice. The Atlanta community began to organize awareness marches, sharing her story under one message: justice for Jokisha. Her friends spoke out publicly, refusing to let her memory be reduced to just a crime. They wanted people to know who she really was, a woman full of dreams, laughter, and love. Her story wasn't just one of tragedy, it was one of courage. Because she did try to save herself. She did fight back. She did believe she deserved peace. As time passed, the investigation intensified. Tips came in. Leads were pursued. The suspect's face was everywhere, on the news, on social media, on wanted posters. The manhunt stretched across multiple states, with law enforcement determined not to let him vanish. Each new report reignited both grief and hope. For some, it was a reminder of how quickly love could turn into danger. For others, it was a lesson about how much society still needed to do to protect women like Jokisha. Then, the turning point, a sighting, a confirmation, and finally, an arrest. The suspect, her ex-partner, was found dead, a self-inflicted end to the story he had written in violence. The news hit differently for everyone. Some felt relief that he could never harm anyone again. Others felt robbed of the chance to see him face justice, to stand in court, to hear him answer for what he'd done. For Jokisha's loved ones, it was bittersweet. The threat was gone, but so was the closure they had hoped for. In the weeks that followed, her story spread beyond Atlanta. National outlets picked it up. Advocacy groups highlighted it as a call to action. She became a symbol of strength and the painful reality of what happens when obsession crosses the line into violence. But beneath the headlines and hashtags was a deeper conflict, the emotional wreckage left behind. Her son, her family, her friends, all trying to rebuild their lives in the shadow of something senseless. Some days brought anger. Others brought numbness. And sometimes both at once. Still, there was something powerful about the unity her story created. People who had never met her stood together, lighting candles, sharing messages of hope. Strangers spoke her name with reverence, vowing to carry her story forward. Jokisha's memory became more than tragedy, it became transformation. Her passing ignited conversations in households, schools, and offices about love, control, and the importance of listening when someone says they're afraid. Because at the heart of this revelation, beneath the investigation and the heartbreak, was a truth the world could no longer ignore. What happened to Jokisha wasn't just a moment of violence. It was a reflection of how love, when twisted by control, can become a weapon. Her story wasn't only about what was lost that night, it was about what needed to change moving forward. And as her loved ones stood beneath candlelight, their faces illuminated by flickering flames, they whispered the same promise to her memory: you didn't leave in vain. Because through the pain, through the heartbreak, through the conflict that consumed them, one message echoed louder than all the rest: her voice will not be silenced. The world often forgets that behind every headline is a heartbeat that once existed. A soul, a story, and the people left to carry that story when the world moves on. For Jokisha Brown, the final act of her life was not just one of tragedy, but of awakening. What followed after her passing would reveal the deep scars of obsession, the slow crawl toward justice, and the extraordinary resilience of those who refused to let her memory fade into silence. When investigators finally pieced together the sequence of that July evening, the truth struck everyone like a storm, sharp, sudden, and unbearable. Jokisha had been moments away from heading home, ready to celebrate her birthday the next day, when the man she once loved appeared. He had been watching, waiting, and when the moment came, he stepped forward to end the very life he once claimed to love. The footage, the eyewitnesses, the evidence, all pointed to one truth. This was not an accident. This was a deliberate act of possession, of control taken to its cruelest extreme. But even in death, Jokisha's courage began to spark something larger, a reckoning. As word spread, her story reached beyond Atlanta. National networks picked it up. Commentators, advocates, and survivors began to speak her name. She was no longer just a victim, she became a symbol. Her story was told in living rooms, classrooms, podcasts, and prayer circles. Her smile, bright and defiant, appeared on posters, murals, and digital billboards calling for change. For law enforcement, the hunt for her ex-partner was a race against time. Every day that passed without finding him deepened the community's fear. He had vanished into the shadows, but he couldn't outrun the growing outrage. Tips poured in, faces scanned every crowd, and every corner of social media became a watchtower. Then news broke. The suspect had been located. But instead of surrendering, he ended his own life. The man whose violence had taken so much had chosen to escape accountability. The city held its breath. Justice, it seemed, would never arrive in the way they'd hoped. There would be no courtroom, no confession, no chance for Jokisha's family to look him in the eye and tell him what he'd taken. It was a hollow victory, relief that he could hurt no one else, mixed with the ache of knowing he had also taken with him the answers they so desperately wanted. In the weeks that followed, grief transformed into something new, purpose. Her mother, her family, and her closest friends began to speak more boldly. They stood in front of cameras, churches, and community centers, telling her story in her own words. They talked about the signs of control, the red flags of obsession, the fear of leaving, and the silence that too often follows cries for help. They made sure the world understood that Jokisha wasn't weak, she was brave. She left. She sought help. She stood up for her peace. And it was that very strength that cost her life. The community rallied. Candlelight vigils turned into marches. Marches turned into town halls. Survivors came forward with stories of their own, women who had been living in fear, who saw themselves in Jokisha's reflection. One after another, they spoke of the times they weren't believed, of the warnings ignored, of the pain hidden behind perfect smiles. And slowly, her tragedy began to shape something lasting, awareness. Local organizations launched campaigns in her name. Hotlines, safe spaces, and advocacy groups amplified their outreach. Churches dedicated services to her memory, reminding their congregations that true love doesn't suffocate, it supports. Social media, once a space of shock and anger, became a platform for education. Posts about warning signs, about leaving safely, about listening when someone says, "I'm scared." Jokisha's story became a mirror, forcing society to confront uncomfortable truths about how easily love can be twisted into control, how often danger is ignored until it's too late. For her son, the aftermath was heavy. But even through grief, he found strength in the legacy his mother left behind. She had built something that couldn't be destroyed. Not her career, not her dreams, but her impact. In the years that followed, he would grow up surrounded by reminders of her. The way she smiled, the way she fought for him, the way her story saved others. Because that was the quiet miracle of Jokisha's story. From tragedy, transformation emerged. Her friends refused to let her name fade into just another case number. They told stories of her joy, her laughter, her kindness, stories that humanized her beyond the crime. She loved to dance, one said. She'd be the first to make a joke when everyone was stressed, said another. She always believed that no matter how dark things got, light would always find a way. And in a way, she was right. That light did find a way. It flickered in every candle lit for her, in every survivor who found the courage to speak, and in every person who learned from her story that silence saves no one. Months later, at a memorial event in Atlanta, hundreds gathered. The air was filled with candles, the scent of flowers, and soft music. A large screen displayed a video montage of Jokisha, laughing, posing, speaking. Her voice played through the speakers. No matter what life throws at you, never stop believing in your worth. Her mother stood on stage, holding back tears as she spoke. My daughter didn't die in vain. She tried to walk away, she tried to live. And even though her journey ended too soon, she continues to save lives through her story. Every woman who listens to her story and decides to leave, that's my baby's legacy. There wasn't a dry eye in the crowd. Because in that moment, everyone understood this was more than grief. This was a movement. Local media captured the vigil, and once again, her name trended online. But this time, it wasn't about the tragedy, it was about empowerment. Hashtag Justice for Jokisha became hashtag Live for Jokisha, symbolizing not what was lost, but what could still be saved. People began sharing stories of the times they'd chosen themselves, chosen peace, chosen freedom, because her story gave them courage. The conflict that began with violence ended with awareness, compassion, and unity. It became bigger than one person, bigger than one city. It became a call for everyone to look around, to listen, to notice when something feels wrong, and to step in before it's too late. In the end, justice didn't come from a courtroom verdict. It came from awakening. From the way people began to care more, pay attention more, and protect one another more. And while her family will always carry the weight of her absence, they've also carried her light, spreading it in every interview, every foundation, every event in her honor. Because that's the thing about love. True love never dies. It shifts, it transforms, and it continues to protect, even when the person is gone. For Jokisha Brown, her legacy became her justice. And for us, the ones hearing her story, the ones who never met her but feel her strength, it's a reminder to check on the people we love, to listen when they whisper their fears, to take every warning seriously, and to understand that behind every smile might be a story we know nothing about. As the credits of her life continue to play out through those who speak her name, one truth remains unshakable. Jokisha Brown didn't just leave a story, she left a message. And that message is clear: love should never hurt. Fear should never be normal. And every voice deserves to be heard before it's too late. If Jokisha's story touched your heart, don't let it end here. Hit that like button, not for the algorithm, but to help her message reach more people. Share this video with someone who might need to hear it, because awareness can save a life. And if you believe every story like hers deserves to be told, subscribe and join our community, where we give a voice to the silenced, the forgotten, and the brave. Because together, we can turn pain into purpose and ensure that Jokisha Brown's light never fades.